Welcome back to Endurance Icons, where we talk to legends in the world of endurance sports. Today, though, you have Mark and Jess, and we have been talking about an important topic that we wanted to chat about today. Mark, first, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm traveling to Des Moines, Iowa this coming weekend. I work at 70.3 there, so new city coming up. And we had a fun last weekend with your birthday, our anniversary, and Milton Sprint Try and a sweet club training day at Guelph Lake. So yeah, I'm feeling jazzed up after an awesome weekend.
I bet you're not jazzed up that I'm going to be leaving tomorrow.
Is that a trick
There's
question?
only one way to answer that.
Yes.
No, you're very sad that I'm leaving.
Yes.
Yes, I'm going to BC. I'm going to go to Vancouver Island. Beautiful place. You were just there for Victoria 70.3. There we go.
Yeah, what a beautiful spot.
Yes. But I wanted to start by talking about Milton. So we did a local race this past weekend. It was a very rainy day. I think that the volunteers there thought that I was insane because I did a race morning sign up. And she looked at me, she's like, who in their right mind signs up for a triathlon? They wake up, they see pouring cold rain and say, you know what I want to do? I want to do a triathlon. And I think the answer to that is triathletes.
I'm glad that I signed up ahead of time because I feel like I wouldn't have wanted to go if I hadn't, but I already did. I was committed.
I'm so glad we did it. It was so
Yeah,
much
no, I'm
fun.
very glad we did it, but it would have been one of those things as you wake up, you're like, we haven't signed up yet. Do we need to do this?
So it was a sprint triathlon.
Yeah, like a Sprolympic.
Oh,
It was
so
like a sprint distance swim, but then 30K bike, 7K run. So kind of in between sprint Olympic bike and run distances.
true. And how did it go for you?
Honestly, it was fine. I had a pretty good swim, bike, I feel like I pushed good power, but it was really slow. I feel like I wasn't riding in aero position very well. I feel like the tri suit I wore, the sleeveless one, is a bit of a sail. I could hear it like flapping in the wind. And then the run, I just felt a little bit sluggish. You blew by me like I was standing still. So it was a good old time. Still beat you though, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, you did. No, I was pretty happy with my run. The bike, my power meter didn't turn on. I biked really hard, but I still couldn't tell you what I did.
Hmm.
I found that I was extra cautious in the rain. I will bike like a wild woman, on even on a technical course. But the moment that those roads are wet, I definitely ease up. It's just not worth a crash.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But I did better in the swim this year than last year. I think we had some comments from listeners in the last episode of just how it was relatable, of putting in so much work on the swim. And this was one of those where I was almost a minute faster though from last year. So it does show that chipping away, it does pay off little by
I
little.
swam almost the same time for like 4 straight years before I finally had a breakthrough last year. Like, and that was many races. I would swim like 31 minutes and 15 seconds at every single 70.3. And now I can swim like 27, 28. So it's just like you gotta chip away at it and it just clicks sometimes. So
No, I agree.
don't give up hope, people.
I am not giving up. The one thing that you and I were chatting about, though, that you were really proud of was you had a bunch of triathletes that you coached that were doing their very first triathlon at the Milton Sprint.
Yeah, that's why I love that one is always the opener for the Ontario Triathlon weekend. And yeah, just seeing so many of our athletes come out and yeah, I'd never done a triathlon before and just their like wide eyes to like, wow, this swim start is crazy and it's raining out here and you just see them finish and they're like, wow, that was amazing. And you just see that they have the bug. You're like, oh, okay, here we go. Now they're into it.
So that's actually what made me think about the topic for today, because you and I have been chatting a lot about some of your new athletes that you're really excited to see that joy and them falling in love with triathlon. And we've chatted a lot about some areas for improvement for me over the years. And I'd love to know, for someone who's looking for a coach, what is the most important thing to look for as an athlete if you're coach shopping, so to speak?
Ooh, yes, there's I think a lot of things you should be looking for when trying to find the right coach because it's easy to just whatever see the first person who's like this Instagram sensation or something and want to jump on board with them because you think they're the best. But I think there's definitely certain coaches that are going to fit for certain people. I'm not going to be the coach for everybody, and I don't end up working with everyone that I end up chatting with. That's why I do like initial athlete calls before I even get somebody to sign up to make sure we're going to be a good fit. I'm not just in it for the money. I want to have people that I'm actually going to work well with, and build a relationship with. So I actually always encourage people to go interview with a couple different coaches. And then I think even before they start that conversation, there's a lot of things they can be looking at, kind of around if this coach has worked with similar athletes to themselves, of like what goals they're going after. So if they're maybe a mid 40s woman who's looking to do their first Ironman, and you go through some of maybe their like Instagram stories or posts and stuff like that, and you see that they've worked with a number of athletes that have kind of gone along that journey, or through talking to them, you learn that, or maybe they know some other women that have gone through exactly that, like finding a coach that has coached people through that to success. So I think that's a super important one. Another one, big one for people, is location. Like, are you okay with working with a coach remotely across the country? I work with a number of athletes who I've never even met in person before, but we find good ways to communicate, whether it's hopping on Zoom calls or Google Meets, plus text message, and communicating through Training Peaks. So those are definitely a couple big ones, but some people really like to be able to see that coach in person. And for newer athletes, if they say need a lot of help with swim that's very technical, or other form-based things, it might be worth it to, instead of going to that coach that lives across the country, who might be maybe a slightly better coach, you might get a little more value from just joining a local triathlon club and learning from people there, a more entry level one, not even necessarily entry level, but just being able to have that value of seeing somebody in person, I think could be really valuable for some people. And some people just like that all the way. You hear about all the people who like have big training groups and see lots of benefit from that. We definitely do in our area, but I feel like I could also be successful like just training on my own as well, but maybe not every athlete would go through that. So I feel like those are some of the key ones, but I always like want people to go like talk to athletes who I've coached before, so they can ask directly like, what's my communication style like, and what's it like to coach with Mark? Because I think the communication piece is huge with athletes as well, in that both their communication style and frequency that they're looking for is super important when talking to a coach. Because if they're really looking for a coach who's going to be hands-on, like messaging with them all the time, like super hand holding, if you want to call it. Not every coach is going to be able to give them that. But yeah, those are some of the sort of main ones. I guess some other pieces to think about are like cost, depending on what you want to spend on stuff. Credentials are a little weird in triathlon. Like, there is some from the governing bodies, but like, as somebody who's taken the Tri Ontario course, like got no real value other than risk management out of that. Like, in terms of coaching styles and stuff, a lot of the platforms don't really have good coaching stuff. I pretty much learned all of my stuff from just talking to coaching mentors, combing the internet, my sports science like degree.
It's true, but I would say with the Tri Ontario piece is that you also have like a kinesiology degree. So there's like a limit to what's going to be new
Sure.
for you, versus like, in a way it's heartening that they offer that, because if someone's just going to say, hey, I'm a coach, and they don't actually have a background in, like, I don't know, I almost said exercise science, but that shows how old I am.
Same sort of
But
thing.
yeah, kinesiology, it's important to have that understanding of how everything works, I think. But so we've talked a lot about, like, I would say as an athlete, I have worked with other coaches, and I'm really glad that I worked with other coaches. I learned every time I worked with someone different, and I found that every stage I was at, I needed a different type of coach.
Mhm.
And I think we've had a conversation that it's actually, you are never offended as if people either choose not to work with you originally or work with you for a while and move on, because you also are an empowering coach. Like, it's really important to you that you teach. I guess the key difference in your style I found from others that I've worked with is that, like, if a person just comes for a plan and shuts their brain off, you don't work well with athletes like that. You want ownership and sort of like that teach them how to fish mentality of like, take the driver's seat of your own training.
Mhm.
Because often if there's something where it's a question mark with my schedule, you'll almost test me and be like, well, what do you want to do? And almost say, okay, like think for yourself.
Yeah, you need to have a brain, and like you're like, I'm not with you every, not just you, but with my athletes, I'm not with you every single workout. I'm not with you on the race course. So you need to be able to make sound decisions and be able to go through a couple options and make a good sound decision. And that's what I'm trying to teach athletes to do along the way. So yeah, they need to be able to do it themselves and be empowered to do that. Because yeah, I think the athletes that don't have those tools in their toolbox when they get there, one, aren't confident, and two, are just like, look, almost have more outs in terms of a race. So like, oh, I just don't have the tools to be able to do this. I'm going to drop out and I'm going to quit on it. Like you just have so much more ownership of that journey and more belief in yourself that you can carry out and execute and get to that finish line in the best possible way you can, and leave it all out there if you are, you know, that you're in the driver's seat and your coach is just like helping push you forward and keep, and you're on the bumpers for them to just try and keep them on track versus trying to push the gas pedal for them.
I think that that's been the biggest thing that I've learned in working with you is that I used to be very much like, just give me the plan. Like, I just want to look at my phone in the morning and look on Training Peaks and know what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to go out and do those paces. But by pushing me, I'll look at the paces, but if my body doesn't feel like it's right for the day, either if I should go a little bit harder or a little bit easier, especially like the easier part. Like I find that's a lot of athletes, it takes, I would say, maturity and being on the block for a while to be able to say, you know what, like I'm okay if I don't, it looks like I'm not hitting my paces or I, run slowly. I think that just shows like playing the long game. But I like full transparency, that took me a while to get there, like many, many years. But I think that pushing that ownership and telling your athletes to focus on like what is your body telling you, and ultimately then you have that consistency that's so important. The one thing that sort of inspired this conversation is recently we were on like a 1 day road trip, and anyone who knows me knows that I love questions. And one of the questions that I just randomly asked you while we were driving was like, what do all of your top athletes have in common? So for the athletes that work with you, what does it look like to be an athlete that actually, so you find the coach that works perfectly for you and you're working well together? What does that relationship look like? And what are the things that set the top performers apart from everyone else?
Yeah, there's definitely some common pieces that have come out in all of my athletes that really get themselves, like we talked in that Jim Vance episode, of like past that threshold and then get themselves to the point where they just know how to make sound decisions to push themselves in the right direction. Some of the things that come to mind, we already talked about it, but like being in the driver's seat, taking the responsibility is a huge one. Another one is just communicating with their coach. Like the worst sign I can have in an athlete is when they've gone MIA and stopped communicating with me, because then I've lost the engagement with it. Like there's some people that maybe don't communicate a ton like via text message or don't need a lot of calls, but they're still like commenting all their Training Peaks workouts, saying like, oh man, felt good today, felt a little sluggish today. And like, as long as you have that like regular touch point that you can tell they're still like very much invested in their journey, it's such an important one. If they're not engaged in it, they're eventually just going to fizzle out, because you can tell they don't have the like love for it. And then being open to feedback is part of that too, of like they're looking for that feedback from their coach in areas where the coach can use that expertise to push them forward. That is a big one in there. And then I was kind of alluding to it in the last piece there, but when the people are super engaged in it, it's because they've probably focused more on falling in love with the process over just this like end goal nugget, thinking that like once I do this Ironman, that like I've reached it. They've realized that, oh, okay, wait, I better like be engaged and fall in love with this process, because it's 99% of the journey, and the race is just this like celebration of fitness, and you can be the most fit on a start line and anything can happen. So if you're hinging all of this months of work and success on this one day, like it's a slippery slope to play. But with that, like that these athletes do still have like some good clear goals in the like future, and it's not always necessarily that they're a time, a distance, or placing goal. They have like good execution goals or targeting a certain discipline or just how they're going to approach it from a different mindset going into it. So that's a really common one I see a lot of from a lot of the people. And one of my favorite ones that people, some of the best athletes I work with, is that there's not this win-lose mentality. It's either like a win or learn. It's like, wow, I crushed that race. That was amazing. Like that one was a win. Or it's like, I made all these mistakes or I didn't hit it. Like, what can I learn from this to be better? Like, what was I lacking in my training or my race prep or my race mindset? Like the people who aren't afraid and are okay to lose because they know that's going to allow them to be better in the future. That is one of the biggest things, because people just miss out on so much of the potential, or skip races, or don't go through a training block because they're afraid of potentially losing, which is
Mm.
a very good one that I see with a lot of my athletes.
It's interesting because I was immediately going to say, oh, I've needed to work on that, but I don't think that I avoid things because I'm going to lose. I think I jump in with both feet, but you and I worked really hard with me of like pass fail workouts. Like if I'm
Yeah,
if I don't
I
do it
hate
perfectly, I'm
pass
like,
fail
oh, I
workouts.
failed it. And you're like, you cannot talk like that. And so I think over the last few years, I've definitely improved, but on that front, but this whole idea of that a workout is something to be won or lost. It's so ridiculous. And
It's,
like,
yeah, you get so granular on it.
I
It's
know.
the like the whole piece you were talking about there is like you have to be flexible and adaptable. And what a coach is doing is they're not actually trying to be um prescriptive with their workouts. They're actually, like, when I'm a coach, I'm actually trying to be predictive. So I'm sitting there when I'm making the next week of training for somebody, I'm going, okay, what did they do the last week? What were they up against in terms of their everyday life, in terms of their work, their family stress? What niggles do they have going on? What's their overall load in the training block and that entire week? And that's how I'm building that next week of, okay, I need to predict with all the information I have, which is why the communication is so important, of what they can handle in this week. And then if things come up, like, again, I'm predicting it based off of the information I have. But if something crops up and suddenly if they have their kids get sick or their work stuff is going crazy that week, like, you need to be adaptable and flexible to that week. It's not just that's set in stone and no matter what happens in life, I got to get the work done. It's like you need to keep the whole vision of this workout is part of a week, that's part of a training block, that's part of this entire umbrella leading into a race. That if you get too granular on just one single workout or one single week or one single interval, that you just like you miss the vision of it, and then you just put yourself in this like tough spiral. So that's one thing the best athletes realize, is that it's not this prescriptive thing and it's got to be done perfectly green. It's like just the coach is predicting with the best info they have, and you got to be willing to like shift, because there's no one way to get to that same goal you're after. I've had some great examples recently of some people who like have got some like run niggles along the way, and they're like, oh my goodness, I've just missed 2 weeks of running. I had a guy yesterday who raced Milton. He didn't run for 2 weeks, and I've seen this all before. Like, you keep great aerobic fitness through the swimming, through the biking, and I'm like, watch, you're gonna come back in 2 weeks and you literally will be no further behind. You might even be ahead on your running. Like, just give it a chance. Don't start to build this narrative in your head. And what happens? He comes out in Milton, his first race back, and runs like his 5K PB within a 7K run within a sprint triathlon. I'm like, see, like, the fitness was there. You did all the work, you did what you could in that time. But if you wanted this like perfect build to get there, like, this may have been a blessing in disguise. So it's like there's so many. I can give 100 examples of some of the like most chaotic, weirdest training blocks ending up in incredible results, and some of the most amazing training blocks ending up in like just terrible races. So like, it's, yeah, the flexibility and adaptability piece is one of the most important pieces. And yeah, just being humble enough to drop the watts on a workout, or just drop a workout as a whole to go get some more sleep, or to spend time with your family, because that fulfills you. So yeah, that's, oh man, one of the most important ones.
So we have a joke in our club, just looking on the other side of this coin, that, some occasionally you'll do some fun chirps on Strava if someone's gone a little rogue after a workout. So they were coined coach's notes. And we all fear a coach's note. So what a coach's note means is you have gone awry in your workout. So we're just going to say, what do your athletes do to get coach's notes? What is a coach's note to Coach Mark?
Yeah, it's most of the time it just doesn't come down, it comes down to not trusting in the process or seeing that big picture, and they're doing things like trying to rush the process of adding in extra volume that maybe wasn't prescribed, or going way too hard in an interval, or chasing a group they shouldn't have when they're already stacked in a week, or moving their week around so that they got this week where it was set out nicely with like, okay, two maybe tougher days, two easier days, and another hard day after that. And life wasn't they didn't communicate with their coach, or life isn't allowing them to fit it all in. So they just stack those 3 intensity days because they see those as the most important altogether. And then they wonder when they come out on the other side with an injury, it's like, well, things were set up in a certain way where they would have been better off just doing those first 2 days, taking the easy day, and maybe they have to miss 2 days and miss a final key workout. Like, it's things like that of just not trusting in the process and trying to rush things, and really prioritizing intensity over just being super consistent and well-rounded as an athlete to really get that like snowball compounding effect of fitness going. When you rush it, it eventually catches up to you in the form of sickness or injury typically. So just the ones that don't trust in the process is where it backfires.
I know, I've seen this.
Seen it all before.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier is that you don't take on everyone who approaches you for coaching. And I think that you have a really clear coaching philosophy. And I think that you're focused on, that consistency